It's been a couple weeks since the NBA draft happened, the summer league has now started, and I think that I've had enough time to reflect and think about each of the picks that the teams made. So in today's video, we'll talk about which teams I think won the NBA draft and what I expect to see from their rookie class this season. If you've not already, please make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel. I'm uploading multiple videos every single week and your support goes a long way. But anyways, getting into things, before I get into the two main winners that we are going to talk about in today's video, I wanted to talk about a few honorable mentions. The first honorable mention that we have is the Atlanta Hawks. Now they only had 2 picks in this year's draft compared to some other teams having 4 or 5 picks, but the 2 players that they got were huge steals in my opinion. The first guy that they drafted in the first round with the 20th overall pick was Jalen Johnson, and I thought that there was no way that he was going to drop outside the lottery or maybe the top 15, but when he dropped to 20, the Atlanta Hawks took advantage, and I think that he was a great pickup for them. I think that he's a top 10 talent. I believe that he has a great chance to be the best small forward in this year's draft, so them getting him that late was a huge steal like I said before. They also drafted Sharif Cooper late in the second round, a guy who many think has a chance to be one of the best point guards out of this year's draft class. He is undersized, he isn't the greatest defender, but he's crafty, his ball handling skills are elite, his passing is elite, his scoring is very, very good. So to get a guy like that, a guy who was talked about among the best point guards in this year's draft class, late in the second round was also a huge steal in my opinion. So despite only having 2 picks, the Atlanta Hawks got a ton of value from this year's draft. The second honorable mention that we have is the Oklahoma City Thunder. They made 4 picks in this draft, and I think that all 4 of the players that they got have a chance to make an impact and be very good players in the future. Obviously, at number 6, they took Josh Giddey, which was a surprise to many people. Josh Giddey was widely considered the best international prospect in this year's draft, but not many expected him to go that high. Not many expected him to be taken inside the top 10. So some people question the pick when the Thunder took him at number 6, but I think that if he reaches his full potential, nobody will be questioning the pick in the future. I don't think that Josh Giddey was necessarily the best player available on the board when the Thunder drafted, but I think that he was the best player for the system that they're trying to build around SGA, so I don't have a problem with them drafting him that high, and I think that if he develops in the way that he can develop, if he reaches his full potential, I think that he's going to be a great player in the NBA for many, many years. They also drafted Trey Mann later in the first round, one of my favorite prospects, an all-around elite scorer, an all-around offensive juggernaut. He can hit the 3, he can hit the mid-range, he can hit the floater, he can score off the dribble, he can finish around the rim. Everything that you want a scorer to do, Trey Mann does, and he does it at a high level. Now, he isn't NBA ready body-wise yet. He's very skinny, he isn't very athletic or strong, but I expect that to improve as his NBA career progresses, and I think that if he can put on a little bit of weight, he's going to be a great player in the NBA for a long time as well. The Thunder had 2 second-round picks as well, Aaron Wiggins and Jeremiah Robinson Earl. Aaron Wiggins is a 6'6" wing player. He can play shooting guard and small forward. He's a great scorer. He has potential to be a great defender as well. He's a bit of a raw prospect, but I think that with a little bit of development, with a little bit of experience and maybe a few years, he will be a very, very valuable role player for them in the future. Jeremiah Robinson Earl is an athletic beast, a great defender, and a guy who I think has a lot of potential to be a lockdown versatile defender, a 1-5 type of guy who can guard all positions because of his size, because of his athleticism, and because of his defensive IQ. Now, his offense is very, very raw. He doesn't have a lot of offensive skills. He isn't the best scorer, but he has shown flashes of a jump shot. So if he can get a more consistent jump shot, if he can get maybe a few post moves, I think that Jeremiah Robinson Earl could be a very valuable piece for them in the future as well. Honestly, I believe that the Thunder could be a winner in this draft in the future, but the reason that I only put them as an honorable mention is because all 4 of these players are a bit risky in different ways. All 4 of these players are going to require development to reach their full potential. None of these players are really NBA ready at this point, so if the Thunder don't do what they need to do to develop these guys, if some of these guys don't reach their full potential, if they don't stay healthy, then this draft class definitely could be a dud for them, but I expect expect at least a couple of these guys to be very valuable pieces for the Oklahoma City Thunder in the future. The last honorable mention that we have is the New York Knicks. They had 4 picks in this year's NBA draft, 3 of them coming in the second round, but despite a lot of their picks being later in the draft, I think that they got a ton of value, and I think that all the picks that they made make sense for their team. The Knicks' first round draft pick was Quentin Grimes. I like this pick a lot. I think that he fits exactly what they want to do. He adds depth to their backcourt, and he's a guy who I think can make an immediate impact on their team. He's a 6'5" combo guard out of Houston. He had a disappointing freshman season at Kansas, but then after transferring to Houston, he became their star player. He plays very well on both ends of the court, especially the defensive end. I think that this is where he thrives. At 6'5", he obviously has very good size for a guard, and he also has quick hands and high defensive basketball IQ, so I think that he's going to be an immediate impact on this team defensively. On the offensive end, he's a good scorer. I think he has potential to be a good passer as well, and I think that if he does improve his passing, if he does improve his floor general abilities, he could definitely be a primary ball handler for the Knicks in the future. The first of the Knicks' second round draft picks was Miles McBride out of West Virginia. He's a guy who is never going to be a star in the NBA, but because of his leadership role at West Virginia and the multiple years that he spent there, I think that he's coming into the NBA more mature and more NBA ready than a lot of the other prospects in the draft, which is why I could see him being a valuable player on their second unit right off the bat. He's a great player on offense. I think that they could run that second unit through him. He's a good scorer, a solid passer, and he's also a solid defender as well. Like I said, just does all the things that you want a veteran leadership type of guy to do for your college program, and I could see him taking on a similar role in the NBA. The second round draft pick for the Knicks is Rokas Jokubaitis. I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing that right. I haven't seen a lot of him, but from what I have seen, he's a crafty guy, not going to wow you with his flashiness or his super athleticism, because he doesn't have super athleticism, but he does have all the fundamentals down. He's a very efficient shooter, a very good ball handler, a very good passer, doesn't turn the ball over a lot, and works hard on defense. Just that typical European player, and I think that he is a guy who, if the Knicks decide to put him in, I'm not sure how much playing time he'll actually see, but I don't think that he's going to make mistakes, and I think that he's going to do his role to perfection. The final second round draft pick for the Knicks was Jericho Sims, a guy who is a bit of a riskier pick, a guy who is definitely a project pick, a guy who's going to need a lot of development, but a guy who I think the risk could pay off big time for. He's a super athlete. I think he has great size, and for that size, he moves very, very well. Like I said, great athlete, jumps out of the gym, but his fundamentals, his skills are not all there. I think that if he develops a few years in the G League, and if he gets some minutes here and there off the bench in the NBA for the Knicks, I think that he is definitely a guy that we could be talking about in a few years as one of the steals from this year's draft. But anyways, that concludes our honorable mentions. Getting into the 2 biggest winners from this year's NBA draft, in my opinion, we have the Houston Rockets and the Charlotte Hornets. For me, this is a 1A and 1B situation. I can't really separate these teams at this point because they both got so many players that I think that they needed. They both filled team needs. They both drafted exactly who they should have drafted. So I think that I need to see their players develop and see them play a little bit more before I could really separate them and declare one the winner over the other. But that being said, let's talk about the Rockets first. With the number 2 overall pick, the Rockets drafted Jalen Green, a guy who a lot of people believe has superstar potential and could end up being one of the best players in the league one day. Obviously, nothing's guaranteed. Obviously, no player's fate is destined to happen, but I think that Jalen Green has all the tools to be great. I think that he has all the tools to be a superstar, so I think that he is definitely worthy of the hype. Jalen Green has gotten a lot of comparisons to Zach LaVine, which I think is actually pretty accurate. Obviously, no comparison is perfect because every player is unique, but you can definitely see the similarities in their game. They both have elite athleticism combined with elite scoring ability. I will say that Jalen Green is definitely more developed skill-wise than Zach LaVine was when he came into the league, but I also think that Jalen Green still has a lot of work to do. His body is nowhere close to NBA ready. He's still very skinny. He's not very strong, but give him a few years and I'm sure that he will be at that NBA ready point. He also hasn't shown to be a great defender, which for a guy with his athleticism, with his ability, he should be a lot better of a defender, but maybe that just has to do more with the strength that I talked about already. Either way, I think that Jalen Green still has a lot of work to do, but I also think that he could end up being even better than Zach LaVine is because of, like I said, his already developed skills and his elite scoring ability coming into the draft. Obviously, Rockets fans and management have to be thrilled with the fact that they got a superstar-like player in Jalen Green, but they also have a lot of other things to be excited about. They had 3 other first-round draft picks, the first being Alperen Şengün, a guy who's the MVP in Turkey as a teenager, a guy who's one of the highest rated international prospects in this year's draft, and one of the highest rated big men in this draft behind Evan Mobley. I think that he's a guy who's going to be very interesting to watch in the NBA. He has a little bit of development to do before he is really going to reach his full potential. There's a skill gap between Turkey and the NBA, obviously. I think that he's going to learn that very quickly. I don't think that he's going to be as dominant as he was in Turkey, but I think that he could definitely be a very, very good center in the NBA with a few years of development, and with the skills that he already has, the athleticism, the length, the ability to play on both ends of the floor, I could see him being a starter for the Rockets in year 1, and I think that he is definitely a guy who is going to make Rockets fans very excited. The Rockets also picked up Usman Garuba, another guy who is a very highly rated international prospect, and in my opinion, he's the most versatile defender in this year's draft. He's one of those rare players who can guard 1 through 5. He's a little bit undersized for the big man position, but he makes up for it with his quickness, his speed, his length, and his athleticism. Defensively, he's going to come in and make an impact right away in the NBA. He's been playing at the highest level in Europe for many years. He's one of the younger prospects in this year's draft, but with all that EuroLeague experience and also international experience for the Spanish national team, I think that he is ready to guard some of the NBA's best players, which is something that very few players in this draft class are going to be able to do. Now, that being said, on the offensive end, he is very, very raw. He doesn't have a lot of offensive skills at all. He is a big man, but he doesn't have very many post moves. I don't think that he necessarily needs to be the best scorer, though. I don't think that he's ever going to be a great offensive player, but on the offensive end, he could add value setting screens, rolling to the basket, catching lobs, and because of his athleticism, because of his high basketball IQ, I think that he should have no problem at least being okay on the offensive end in the future, and like I said, his defense is the most valuable aspect of his game anyways. The final of the Rockets' 4 first-round picks was Josh Christopher, a guy who's been all over social media since his freshman year in high school, an elite athlete, a very fun player to watch, a guy who's a little bit raw on the offensive end, a guy who's a little bit streaky and inconsistent as a shooter, but I think that because of his elite athleticism, because of his basketball experience, he should have no problem improving on offense. He's a good scorer, it's just like I said, a little bit inconsistent at times, and I'm sure that as he gets into the NBA, give him a few years and he will be much more consistent. His elite athleticism should allow him to be a lockdown defender. He has been a lockdown defender since his high school days, and I think that with his length, with his vertical ability, and with his size, he should be able to be a great defender in the NBA right off the bat. I think that the Rockets picked up 4 guys who have the potential to be starters for them in year 1. I don't think all 4 of them will be, but all 4 of these guys will definitely make an impact for the Rockets in their rookie years, and I think that in the future this could definitely be a core of 4 players that they got from a single draft, which is pretty crazy to think about. Jalen Green, superstar potential. Alperen Şengün has potential to be a great center in the NBA. Usman Garuba, like I mentioned, one of the best defenders in the EuroLeague. I think that he has potential to be one of the best defenders in the NBA. Josh Christopher, all-around athlete, another guy who with a little bit of development could definitely have a long career in the NBA. The Rockets had an amazing draft, and I think that they could definitely end up being the winners in the future. Now let's talk about our second winner from this year's NBA draft, the Charlotte Hornets. Getting James Bouknight at number 11 with their first round pick was a huge steal for them in my opinion. Nobody thought he'd drop outside the top 10. He did, and the Charlotte Hornets made the right pick by picking him. He fits perfectly into what their team needs. They needed a shooting guard. They needed another guard to go beside LaMelo, and I think that James Bouknight was the perfect pickup for them. He's an elite scorer with elite athleticism, and if he fixes up a few small issues, if he can become a little bit better defender, I think that James Bouknight is going to be a star in this league. The Charlotte Hornets were already one of the most exciting young teams to watch in the NBA, so adding a guy like Bouknight with his elite athleticism, with his elite scoring ability, is only going to make them more fun to watch. I'm excited to see how him and LaMelo Ball play together. I'm excited to see how they fit. I'm excited to see the highlight plays that result from those two playing together, and I'm excited to see how many games they can win once this team builds chemistry. Later in the first round, the Hornets traded with the Knicks to pick up Kai Jones. He's a guy who plays the center position, which is a position that they definitely need to fill. They definitely need to add depth to. He has a ton of potential, so he's not fully developed yet, but I think that if they give him a few years, if they work with him a little bit, he could definitely become an elite two-way player for them. I like his game a lot despite it not being fully developed. He's long, he's athletic, he moves very well for a big man, and I'm sure that in a few seasons with this current core that they have, as he develops with the other young players on the Hornets, he could definitely be a Clint Capella type player for them, catching lobs and setting screens on the offensive end, as well as sending back shots on the defensive end. I think that it was a great pickup for them, and once again, it was a thing that they needed to add to their team, and once again, it's exactly what their team needed. The Hornets also drafted two players in the second round, which were JT Thor out of Auburn and Scotty Lewis out of Florida. Both these players are great athletes and great defenders. Both are a little bit raw on offense, but have shown offensive potential. So I think that in a few years, if they can develop a little bit, they could definitely be valuable role players for the Hornets. JT Thor is especially interesting because he's 6'9" with a 7'4" wingspan. If he were able to get a consistent jump shot and a few scoring moves, he would be a very tough player to deal with. Both of these players could have an impact on the Hornets team because of their athleticism and defensive abilities, but adding that offensive ability, adding that scoring ability would only make them that much more dangerous. So I think that both of these guys were great pickups for the Hornets. If I had to give the Houston Rockets and Charlotte Hornets a rating for this year's draft, they would definitely both get A+. I think that they both did a nearly perfect job drafting given the situations that they were in. They both added positions of need. They both added players who can make immediate impacts on their team, and they both added players with star potential. So like I said, that's pretty much all you could expect out of a draft. I don't really have a clear winner between them at this point. I couldn't really separate them. Like I said, it's more of a 1A and 1B situation. Both of these teams won the draft. I think that there's a lot of other teams who had great drafts too, but I would say that those two are definitely the clear winners in my eyes. That is the video. Let me know what you guys think. Who do you think won this year's NBA draft? Who do you think is going to be the best player out of this year's draft? And remember to drop a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. I'll see you in the next one.